The sun hadn't yet broken over the jagged ridges of Grey Pine Hollow, but inside a crumbling cabin tucked at the edge of the forest, a voice was already echoing. "Skara, get off the table!" Grit Winters barked the words like a hammer hitting stone, his tone sharp, frustrated, worn thin by routine. The young bobcat froze, her soft paws inches from knocking over a battered lantern. Her ears twitched, and her golden eyes narrowed, not out of fear, but something quieter, sadder. Grit wasn't a bad man. At least, not in the way folks usually meant it. He'd spent most of his 50-odd years in these woods, trapping, hunting, doing what he called living real. After a back injury had ended his logging days, solitude became both his prison and his peace. When a wildlife rescue worker brought Skara, barely a kitten, mother killed by a poacher, Grit had agreed to take her in. Maybe out of pity, maybe to feel less alone. But bobcats aren't dogs. They don't obey. They don't sit on command. And Skara, she was born with the wild stitched into her soul. Day after day, Grit tried to tame her, with orders, with shouts, with cold silence when she didn't listen. He didn't hit her, never that, but he raised his voice enough to send the birds flying from the trees, and Skara, always alert, always watching, grew more distant. The neighbors never saw her. Grit didn't take her into town. Folks at Marnie's general store joked that he's got a mountain ghost for a pet, but Grit never laughed. He'd just shake his head, buy his canned beans and coffee, and head back to that cabin where the walls held too many shadows. That morning, though, something was different. Skara hadn't come when he called for breakfast, her bowl still clean, her usual perch by the window empty. Grit rubbed his jaw, scanned the room, then stepped outside, whistling low. Nothing, no rustle, no paw prints in the frost. The forest was quiet, too quiet. He didn't know it yet, but the silence wasn't just a momentary stillness. It was a goodbye. Grit stood on his porch, the cold seeping through his boots, staring into the woods like they might speak back. "Skara!" he shouted again, louder this time, voice cracking through the pine-thick morning. But the forest just swallowed it whole. No sound came back, not even birdsong. He waited and waited, but she was gone. By mid-morning, Grit had searched every trail around the cabin, checking the stream bank where Skara liked to crouch and stare at fish, the rocky bluff she'd turned into a nap spot. Even the thicket behind the old outhouse she always sniffed around for rabbits. Nothing. No prints, no fur, no sign of struggle. Just absence. He tried to brush it off. "She's a wild one," he muttered to himself, trudging back to the cabin. "She'll come back when she's hungry." But something gnawed at him. Not worry, not yet. Just this strange hollowness, like the room was suddenly too big, too still. That evening, Grit didn't yell. He didn't say anything. He just sat at the table, staring at the empty spot where she used to curl up at his feet, purring like a chainsaw. The silence stretched on, long, heavy. 2 days passed, then 3. Still no Skara. On the 4th day, Grit found himself at the edge of Crooked Pine Ridge, where the forest opened up into a sweeping view of the valley. He hadn't been there in years. It used to be his favorite lookout. Now he only came because, well, he didn't even know why. Some part of him hoped he'd see a flash of fur, hear a rustle, anything. Instead, all he saw was the wind brushing over trees. He sat down hard on a boulder and took off his hat. For a long moment, he didn't move, and then something happened. Grit hadn't expected. He missed her, not the bobcat she was, not the wild creature who climbed his curtains and knocked over his tools, but her, Skara. The way she'd sit by the door every morning like she was guarding him, the way she blinked slowly when she looked at him, trust even when he didn't, deserve it. The way she never ran from storms, just watched the rain with calm curiosity like it belonged to her. He thought of all the times he'd raised his voice, all the slammed cabinet doors, all the silences that followed, and now silence was all he had. Back at the cabin that night, Grit opened the door and left it wide, just in case. He lit the porch lantern and left out her bowl. But deep down, he felt it. Skara wasn't coming back. The nights grew colder, and Grit stopped counting the days. Skara had been gone for over 2 weeks now, and the stillness that once felt like peace now pressed against the walls of the cabin like a weight. No scratches at the door, no claws clicking on the floor, no low growl of impatience. When dinner was late, Grit hadn't realized how much she filled the silence. Not just the space, but him. He started waking up in the middle of the night, thinking he heard her, a rustle under the window, a soft thump near the hearth. But every time he checked, nothing. Just shadows. Just wind. One morning he sat with his coffee, staring at the scratched-up arm of the couch. She used to claw it just to get a rise out of him. He'd shout, wave his arms, and she'd blink, completely unfazed, like he was the one acting wild. And now, that scratch was the only thing left of her. Grit stood, went to the door, and stepped outside. The forest was misty, cool, wrapped in silence. And for the first time, he didn't just feel guilty. He felt ashamed, not because she'd left, but because she'd trusted him to be her person, and he'd failed her. He didn't understand it before. Skara wasn't a dog waiting to obey. She was a wild creature who chose him. She had every reason not to trust humans. She'd come from some busted-up place before him. But she had, slowly, with eyes that watched everything. With the way she'd rub her side along his leg after a long day, the way she'd curl near his boots like they were her territory, and he'd yelled every time he didn't understand her, every time she was loud or knocked something over or didn't listen. He hadn't tried to meet her halfway. Now she was gone, and he knew why. Later that day, Grit grabbed his coat and walked deeper into the woods, beyond the trails, into the dense timber where animals rarely saw men. He followed instinct more than logic, places Skara might have gone. And about 2 miles in, he found something that stopped him cold. Tracks feline, deep, recent, and not just one set. There were 2, one large, one smaller, side by side. Grit crouched slowly, heart thudding in his chest. He studied the prints, ran. A finger along the edge. The big ones were hers. He was sure of it, but the smaller ones. He didn't know. A bobcat kit. Was she not alone? He stood there for a long time, wind brushing his coat, the forest breathing around him, and for the first time in weeks, something like hope stirred in his chest. She was alive. She'd found something out here, or someone. The wind picked up as Grit followed the trail. The further he walked, the quieter the forest became. No birdsong, no rustle of squirrels, just snow-crusted leaves underfoot and the distant creak of tree limbs swaying above. It felt like a place the world had forgotten, wild, untouched, sacred. And maybe that's why Skara had come here. The tracks weaved through dense brush, up a narrow ridge and into a thicket of pine. Grit's breath caught in his throat as he stepped into the clearing. There, tucked beneath the roots of a fallen tree, was a hollow, lined with dried leaves. He could see where the pine needles had been flattened. A place to sleep, to nest. The kind of place an animal would only make if they planned to stay, but it was empty. He crouched, scanning the ground, heart pounding. More prints, one larger, one smaller. Again, side by side. Still recent, hours old at most. She had been here, and not just surviving, thriving. She had built something in this solitude, chosen to live wild, chosen to be what she was always meant to be, and she didn't need him anymore. That truth hit Grit harder than he expected. He sat down slowly beside the tree. No movement, no sign of her now, just that lingering presence. The feeling that she had stood here once, eyes watching the forest, head lifted to the wind. "I'm sorry, girl," he said into the quiet. "I didn't know how to be good to you. I treated you like you were mine, like you were broken. You weren't. You were just trying to be free, and I made that hard." He took off his glove and pulled something from his coat pocket, a worn leather collar, hers. He hadn't been able to throw it out, not because he thought she'd wear it again, but because it reminded him of what he'd done wrong. He placed it gently inside the hollow, not as a gesture to reclaim her, but as a symbol, a goodbye. A few moments later, he stood. The snow began to fall softly around him, flakes melting on his beard, his coat. He turned to leave, heart heavy, but lighter than it had been. Then a sound, a faint rustle in the trees behind him. He froze, slowly turned, and there she was, Skara, perched on a fallen log, half camouflaged in the snow, her green eyes locked on his. She looked thinner, leaner, tougher, but undeniably her, wild, untamed, beautiful. Grit didn't move, didn't breathe. Behind her, barely visible in the underbrush, a second pair of eyes blinked, a bobcat kit, small, curious, clinging to the shadows. Skara gave a low, steady growl, not of warning but of declaration. She had made her choice. This was her life now, and Grit, he wasn't part of it. Grit didn't move, not an inch. Skara stood still too, her body perfectly poised. Not tense, just present. She wasn't scared, wasn't angry, just resolute, and that little one behind her. The bobcat kit. Its wide eyes peeked out from behind a patch of dead fern, ears twitching, curious but cautious. A long silence settled. Over the woods, thick as the snow falling between them. Grit swallowed hard, a lump rising in his throat. He wanted to say something, anything. But what words could reach her now? She didn't belong to him, never had. And for the first time in his life, he truly understood that wildness isn't something you tame. It's something you honor. And he hadn't. He took a slow breath, then nodded. A small, respectful gesture, the kind you give a creature of the forest, not a pet. Skara blinked once in return, then turned away, vanishing into the trees with her cub close behind. No drama, no final look back, just gone. Grit stood alone in that quiet clearing for a long while, snow melting on his shoulders. And when he finally walked away, he felt something shift inside him, not closure but acceptance. Back in Brindle Creek, things changed. Grit stopped hunting with the same cold, emotionless purpose. He started talking to folks more, especially the kids, telling them about what it really meant to share land with animals like Skara. Not to dominate, not to control, but to live alongside, to respect. He even took down the old traps nailed to his barn wall, replaced them with carved wooden plaques, each one etched with a memory from those years with Skara. Not trophies, just reminders. Months later, during a spring thaw, he walked the same trail again, just to feel close to her. And there, half buried in moss and pine needles, was the collar he'd left in her den, untouched, but still there. He picked it up, brushed it off, and smiled. She hadn't needed it. She had everything she ever wanted, in the wild, and somehow that was enough for him. That day, Grit finally understood. You don't earn the love of a wild thing. You earn the right to witness it, if only for a while. And in that short, powerful while, Skara had taught him everything.